You're a DC. You're a defensive coach. What do you think DeMeco needs to do the next month and a half, given that it's his first time being a defensive coordinator and he's installing a defense that he's admitted is a little different from his predecessor? So, what do you think he needs to do the next month and a half?
I think you have to make sure like all your pieces fit together in what you're trying to do, and that it's a scheme that your players are going to be able to understand, and it's not going to break, because offenses are going to try your scheme, and they're going to really try to break it. So for him, I think he's going to have to put together packages that complement his personnel well, and it little ties into the safety stuff that we're talking about, because for me, like you don't want to have for instance, a package that is reliable on an oft injured group, and then those players get injured, and then your backups can't do the same thing as those players. So you have to do something completely different. And
We've been talking about this with the safeties for weeks, and you mentioned Tart and Ward. Isn't it ironic that the reason they can't do this because Moore went down? Sorry, but
yeah,
this is exactly what you've been talking about. It's like, don't get ahead of yourself with all the things you're going to do with your safeties, considering the history there.
yeah, that's why it's important to have backups that can do. I mean, backup isn't going to be as good as your starter, right? But you want them to have a similar skill set, so you don't have to completely change the things that you do, because it's not just a plug and play, right? When you practice something, it's affecting all 11 players. All 11 players are getting used to what you're practicing, not just those two players. So if you have a package in, and you're using three safeties, and that's your answer for that's your nickel package. That's your answer for third down and passing situations. Now, if one of those safeties goes down, and your answer is to put a corner there, and that corner isn't used to the run fits, then
You're screwed. Then you have Brian
yeah,
Allen,
yeah,
the safety equivalent of Brian Allen. One player
right.
can ruin everything.
So
Yes.
you got to have answers. You got to have answers for that. You got to be a step ahead. What happens if we get an injury? Like, can this
Mm-hmm.
that? Those are the things you have to prepare for. Prepare your packages. Prepare your packages for your backups, with your backups in mind. Like, you should build your defense around, I mean, the abilities that Fred Warner, but you have to be prepared. If Fred Warner is not out there, what can the backup do? Because if you're reliant upon Fred Warner to shut down the middle of the field schematically,
What
and
happens if he gets hurt week one?
can't do that, like, what happens?
I
Because,
have an example of that. 2016, Chip Kelly hired Jim O'Neill as his defensive coordinator. Jim O'Neill and Chip Kelly wanted to run a true 3-4, which you almost never see anymore. That's a 0 technique, 2-5 technique, 2-4 techniques. So that puts a lot of pressure on that nose tackle, man. You got to be good. You're kind of on your own. And Glenn Dorsey was the guy. It was either Glenn Dorsey or Ian Williams. Anyway, the dude went down in training camp right away. And
yeah,
they had to put Mike Purcell at 0 technique, which is, I mean, you would need Vince Wilfork to pull that off. You really need that dude to be your best player on defense. And so the Niners would just give up 250 yards between the tackles every week. And Jim O'Neill's like, man, I can't figure out what's going on here. It's like, man, you can't run this front with that nose tackle. You gotta have a shaded front. And he finally figured it out after quality control stepped in. But it's like, you're just gonna let them run down your throats because you're playing a front that is unfeasible with Mike Purcell. Was on him. It was all his fault. All his fault.
yeah, and that goes into teaching and everything too. I mean, it's and schematics, like a two gap and one gap defense. It's a different that type of defense, and it's
Yeah.
upon
Yeah.
a certain type of like you can't
Read and react.
can't be as aggressive as they can in a one gap scheme. So, and even it changes your backers too, right? The way your backers flow, because your backers have to read
Totally.
like they can't just be aggressive downhill. So
And that's probably why he didn't change things up, because he felt like he had instilled this entire read and react defense. Well, it's all predicated on your nose tackle being a freaking stud, and you lost him in training camp. And so it's exactly what you're saying. It's like, if your entire scheme is built on Fred Warner, being a freaking stud, okay, great. Well, what's the plan when he goes down? Otherwise, you can't just have go from good to bad.
I think people overlook it, that I think they spend a lot of time on how offensive players practice and getting comfortable in the system. It actually works the same way as a defense. Like when I have a freshman player and he's working way up through his system, and he's a backer, and he sees the same thing on the lower levels. He sees a combo block, and he sees how a guard's coming up to him, and he sees those same plays over and over again. It's repetition. So like in the same system. So he's getting used to how teams, because you can only block things so many certain ways. He's getting used to how
you reach and run, you pin and pull. I mean, there's only so many
so
things
it
you can
becomes
do.
reactionary, right? And it works the same way defensively as it does offensively. So I think like there is something to being in the same scheme and staying with a certain group of plays that your defense is used to, and that's what DeMeco really has to do, is like what is develop a scheme or have a scheme and packages ready that even his backups can use.
And I want to add one thing to that. I think he also should probably do some advanced, not that he hasn't already, but he should start looking ahead to week 1, what he's going to do with Detroit. That's a tough, I mean, you don't know what that offense is going to look like. As a new coaching staff, he needs to do some prep work, I think, on maybe visualizing how he wants to call that game, get his quality control guys to do cut-ups of all the different offensive linemen and skill position players. I would get a head start on that.
Well, I'm sure he has. Well, I'm sure he has something in his mind, right? Because the common denominator with Detroit is Goff, right? Jared Goff. He's gone Jared Goff. He's been in.
He knows his tendencies, but at the same time, you don't know if that's going to be a run-first offense, if they're going to set up the pass with the run, what the hell they're going to be. It's tough.
Yeah, I do like Detroit's offensive line. I think it's an underrated unit, and now that they have their premier tackle, the guy that I liked a lot. So I think they could have their hands full up front.
All right, DeMeco, we just laid it out for you. You got this. Will says, coaches learn more from film than players from my experience. Film's most beneficial to show tendency both for and against, and play callers benefit most. Okay, I'm not saying just like turn on the film and watch it like we do in real time. Like get the clips that you want, have us quality control, cut them up, have freaking Mike McDaniel, DeMeco Ryans, and Kyle Shanahan narrate the stuff and tell them this is what I see from the right tackle. This is how we're going to beat him. This is his tendency. Yeah, show him the tendencies. I'd like to see it. If I were on that team, I'd be interested. I would go to those classes.
There's a couple things. A couple things. First, like you can tell a player that this is what your opposition is doing, but showing them is a lot different. Yep. Like, so that's where film. And I've had it in the past where a player identifies something that like coaches only have so many eyes. Like if I have a team full of 50 guys and we're all watching film, it's just more eyes. So
and everyone's looking for something different.
Yeah, player might. I've had it happen in the past where a player had hey, this guy stutters too much before he runs a slant. Like I've had that happen. Like so, it's not players definitely benefit from watching film. Like can coaches probably see more? Yeah, but and the other thing is, remember, NFL players are not the same as college players. Are they the same as high school players? So these guys are trained on how to watch film too. So again, I've said it before, it's their job. Like this is how they're getting paid for their living. So like when Tom Brady's in his living room on his iPad, like he's not in it. He's working. Like that's what he's doing.
And he's looking for specific things. He's not just like, let's just see what hits. Let's see what I gather. No, he's looking for specific things because he's been doing it for 20 years. God, I would love to watch film with Tom Brady. That would be so interesting. Kyle Shanahan too. It'd be so interesting. Imagine just canceling minicamp. But anyway.